Welcome to today's Explainer. We're going to dive straight into an incredibly profound, personal, and really anthropological journey through American religious spaces. We are unpacking a deeply compelling source text today, one that explores what exactly happens when the pure tenets of a global religion collide head-on with the complex and sometimes really harsh realities of American racial logic. This isn't just your standard story about theology, right? It's about the literal boundaries of belonging, and ultimately, who actually gets the power to draw those boundaries.
Our journey today kicks off with a deeply painful realization. While working as a teacher, the author of our source material experienced some very direct mistreatment and exclusion from their fellow Christians. And in response to all that, they found themselves asking this exact heartbreaking question, I'm Christian too. Why does that not matter to you? It's a jarring question to hear, isn't it? Because it completely strips away all the high-level theology and just cuts straight to the core of basic human connection.
So let's set the stage here with Part 1, A Foundation in Faith, from the Jesuits to the classroom.
To really grasp how impactful that exclusion was, we absolutely have to look at the author's background. We're not talking about an outsider looking in here. They were deeply, deeply embedded in the faith. They literally studied directly with the Jesuits. They didn't just understand one single denomination. They mastered the really tricky nuances between Lutheran, Catholic, and Baptist traditions by actually living inside those spaces. And ultimately, they took all of that hard-earned knowledge and entered a Christian school as a teacher, so they were fundamentally part of the community.
But here is the crucial turning point. Despite having the exact same theological foundation as everyone else around them, the author hit a massive wall. They were excluded and mistreated. And get this, it wasn't because their faith was wrong, it wasn't because their theology was flawed, it was simply because their race didn't match the majority. It was this stark, painful realization for them. Theological agreement was suddenly taking a back seat to racial prejudice.
Which brings us right to Part 2, The Culture of Hypocrisy. An anthropological view.
Now, rather than just walking away from that pain, the author did something absolutely fascinating. They zoomed away out and put on an anthropological lens. And when they did, they noticed a massive disconnect. Globally speaking, Christianity is inherently diverse, right? It spans every continent, color, and tongue. But in American practice, the author identified what they call the quiet rule. It's this unspoken dynamic where you can share the exact same religion, you can know all the same verses, but you still won't truly belong if your race doesn't match the dominant group.
Now, the source text is very careful to add some important nuance here. Let's be clear. This quiet rule isn't true of every single Christian or everywhere you go. In fact, the author points out that believers raised outside the U.S. are often defiantly welcoming. But there is a very specific critique of U.S. culture at play here. American culture tends to take a pure faith, glamorize it, and essentially brand it. And because of that, the original inclusive meaning of the faith so often gets buried under all the cultural and racial baggage that just gets stacked right on top of it.
The author even pinpoints a specific geographic flavor to this whole phenomenon, which they call the Midwest edge. Basically, this is a cultural undertone characterized by a super rigid, you're either my religion or you're not right mentality. And for the author living in this region, that specific edge really amplified those feelings of exclusion, making that unspoken quiet rule feel incredibly loud.
Let's look at how they process this in Part 3, A Test of Leadership, Love versus Dominance.
You know, facing that kind of rigid exclusion could so easily make someone bitter, but the author actually viewed this experience as a divine test. They used it as a way to compare those who lead with love versus those who rule by dominance. According to the author, leading with love is authentic. It's driven by actual merit, skill, and talent. On the flip side, raw dominance is what you see when people run these exclusive spaces not through merit, but through brute force and inherited position. And importantly, the author notes that this kind of dominance carries a heavy karmic weight. It's really a powerful way to objectively analyze toxic power structures without losing your own spiritual grounding in the process. This leads us to our final section, Part 4. 2 books, new communities, and intersecting identities.
So, this intense curiosity about leadership and belonging eventually propelled the author into a completely new exploration. Culturally, being of Arab descent, the author was driven to spend real time with the Quran. But what's truly captivating here is a specific artifact they point to, a rare Spanish-language edition of the Quran. This isn't just a cool old book, it's a physical bridge between cultures. It actually represents a massive demographic shift happening right now, in real time. To understand exactly what that Spanish Quran represents, we have to look at the broader demographic landscape. Historically speaking, the communities around the Bible and the Quran haven't exactly welcomed each other with open arms, right? But today, Islam is actually the fastest-growing faith on earth. And in the US, Latinos are turning to it in unprecedented numbers. Now, add this absolutely crucial layer to the mix. The author points out that this faith is largely run by Arabs, not by white Americans. And within the strict, rigid racial logic of the United States, Arabs themselves have never been categorized as white. So what you have is a growing demographic of Latinos integrating into a faith led by Arabs, completely sidestepping the traditional, white-dominated religious structures.
So we arrive at this incredibly powerful juxtaposition. On one hand, the Biblia represents the author's deep foundational roots, but it also represents the space where they suffered complex, really painful encounters with American racial logic. On the other hand, the Quran represents a new exploration. And the source imparts a really striking observation here. Moving between these two worlds, the author notes that the people they met inside this second book, inside these new shifting communities, proved to be some of the kindest and most defiantly inclusive souls they had ever known.
Which brings us to the ultimate takeaway of this whole explainer. The author's journey shows us, plain and simple, that theology alone doesn't dictate a community's culture. The cultural and racial logic layered on top of it does. So I want to leave you with this final provocative thought to reflect on today. When the book, the pure theology, stays the exact same but the racial logic changes, who truly gets to belong? Thank you so much for exploring this fascinating topic with me. Keep asking these tough questions and keep looking at the spaces you inhabit with that same anthropological curiosity.